and thank you for joining us today. I'm Naomi Waite and I'm Tourism Northern Ireland's Director of Marketing. It really only seems like 5 minutes ago, Northern Ireland was riding the crest of a wave of significant growth, and myself and colleagues across the industry were reflecting on the successes of 2019, such as hosting the 148th Open and launching our new Northern Ireland Embrace the Giant Spirit brand at World Travel Market. But of course, times have changed and we've all had to adapt and develop our skills and knowledge, and we'll need to continue to do so. Our team in the Business Support Centre have been taking your calls, and these lines will remain open for as long as they need to. We're also really delighted at the response to our webinar series on a range of subjects such as accessing funding, navigating the job retention scheme, accelerating digital marketing and people management, and we hope you find these useful. You've also really embraced the marketing and communications we issued over the recent months, and we really appreciate your support and thank you for staying in touch. Last year, however, an independent industry-led steering group was set up to review the Northern Ireland domestic tourism market. I'd like to thank all the members of the steering group for their input. Whilst the domestic market has always played a vital role in underpinning our tourism business, particularly outside high season, I don't think any of us could have predicted the current circumstances we find ourselves in, and the critical role that the domestic market will play in the coming months ahead. I'm confident, given time and support, our international markets will pick up again. But today we want to share the research in the domestic market and follow up quickly with some training which will allow you to access your closest home market in the vital first stage of recovery. This webinar, led by Conor Kavanagh from business advisory firm Genesis, will cover all aspects of the strategy and unpack the research in a meaningful way. It's also, of course, very important this research was led by industry, and we're delighted that Ciaran O'Neill from Bishopsgate Hotel, chair of the steering group, who took such an active role in the development of the strategy, can join us today. It's vital this research is meaningful and helps you in this recovery phase. I'd now like to pass you over to Ciaran, who can share with you his experience of being on the steering group and what the research will mean for him and his business and hopefully yours. Over to you, Ciaran.
Thank you for joining us today. For those who do not know me in the tourism industry, I am Ciaran O'Neill, Managing Director of Bishopsgate Hotel in Derry, Londonderry. As Naomi mentioned, the tourism industry has been faced with its most difficult challenge over the last few months. The impact of the pandemic is being felt around the world and in many industries. It's hard to know what the new normal will look like for us all, particularly for those working in tourism and hospitality sector. If 12 weeks of video calls and remote working and cutting your own hair have taught us anything, it is that we have an inordinate ability to adapt and innovate. We have new daily routines and rituals and a greater understanding of the local environment. I do believe strongly that we will adapt and embrace change to ensure that our businesses flourish. Over the next 18 months, we will perhaps be measured as much by our resilience as our ability to innovate. I was delighted to chair and be part of the domestic tourism strategy for Northern Ireland Steering Group at a time when we were looking at this segment and how important it was to the Northern Ireland economy. We considered how we could protect and grow this segment to gain a stronger market share on the back of the successful work that was carried out with the Say Hello to More campaign in conjunction with Genesis, targeting particularly the Irish market. Little did we know how critical this market would become in the recovery process to build our tourism product in the months ahead. The work done by the working group in partnership with Genesis and breaking down the segmentation enabled us to see where the opportunities for growth were. And I, as a hotelier, were very encouraged by this piece of work. This is an opportunity to grow this segment and secure more bookings based on a staycation model. My experience within the hotel industry, whilst extensive, could not have prepared me for the collapse of my business and our industry, which occurred in such a quick and devastating manner. Our thinking and the way we do business has to change. Our focus is to get our sector and individual businesses back up and trading in the face of the many uncertainties that lie ahead of us. I know as a leader of my business, this will be down to me and the team at the hotel to build a stable business model. As an industry, we are grateful for the funding and support schemes that government have put in place to enable us to navigate our way through this crisis. However, we need to ensure that we can put the necessary business plans in place to return to the trading levels pre-COVID-19. Life will return to normal. Our industry will bounce back. We now need to focus on training our staff, preparing our properties to welcome back our guests in the coming weeks. After many weeks in lockdown, we need to re-engage our teams and restart our industry, overcoming the many challenges that lie ahead of us all. Our industry will get through this and begin to recover, but it is critical that we regain the confidence of our customers. This will also mean that many of us will have to rethink our business model and look closer to home for the next 12 to 18 months for our customers. But as hoteliers, we are confident that we are up for the challenge, and as difficult as it may seem right now, it is important to focus and to believe the growth that we experienced in the tourism sector since 2012 will continue to be one of the main drivers for the Northern Ireland economy in the coming years. I, for one, will be delighted to open the doors of Bishopsgate Hotel on Friday, the 3rd of July, and welcome back our guests to the hotel. As Naomi said, the time of carrying out this review around domestic tourism, we never could have contemplated that this would now turn out to be a priority market for us all in the summer of 2020. We're delighted to share the findings with you today, and hopefully they will enable you to form a part of your strategy plan and increase your share in this market. I suggest you listen carefully and take away what the findings mean for your individual businesses. Please follow up with the sales training and complete the action plan. If there ever was a time for planning, it's now. Thanks again for joining us today, and I'll hand you back to Conor at Genesis.
Thank you very much, Ciaran. And thank you for everyone for joining us today. I might start by introducing myself. My name is Conor Kavanagh. I'm Consulting Director at Genesis, and as the guys have mentioned already, I was responsible for running the work and authoring some of the strategy, and obviously as well doing a lot of the research and some of the consumer work. So a good intimate understanding of the strategy. And it's my role this afternoon to walk you through some of the context behind the strategy and talk about the strategy itself, and critically the segments that have been identified more broadly, but also prioritized in the context of the domestic market. So if I can start with a little bit of background, I think the important thing to say is in some ways when we came into the work, it was really about putting the third leg in the stool in terms of Northern Ireland's overall tourism offering. So there had been extensive work in terms of the international markets, including GB, and also there had been extensive work that Genesis was involved in terms of the Republic of Ireland strategy, to key critical markets that had to be considered. But there was a final piece to the jigsaw in terms of actually really building out a full holistic understanding for the industry, the sector itself, and that was the domestic market. So I think as you'll probably all know, that the domestic market in any tourism destination is usually very critical. It can be a real mainstay and a heartbeat of the market itself. It gives markets a core. So irrespective of how motivating it might be to get international visitors, to attract people from the Republic of Ireland, it's also critical that the domestic market itself is maintained and sustained as a critical dimension of the overall market. So the interesting thing as well is, as been referenced, I mean, obviously as well in the context of COVID-19, the focus on the domestic market is even more accelerated, because in some ways that's the only market to a certain degree, including the Republic of Ireland, which is immediately available. So in terms of immediate recovery, it's very important. So it brings this piece of work into sharper focus as well. But back to the work itself, I mean, in terms of how it was completed, it was overseen by an independent steering group made up of your peers that really kept it focused and on track and kept it very objective. We did extensive review of existing analysis and data and research to understand that. We engaged in industry consultation to hear the voice of the industry. We engaged with councils to hear the perspectives and thoughts of the councils as well, a critical stakeholder within this. And perhaps most importantly, we listened very well to the actual consumer themselves, and that was manifest in a two-stage process. One very extensive quantitative study that looked at the entire market, domestic market, and then used good analytical skills to segment the market. And then, very importantly, followed up with the qualitative exercise where we got into rooms with the actual consumers and really understood them. So there's one thing having the data and information, and there's another thing having a real conversation and being able to ask the question, why do you think this? Why do you behave that? Why is your perspective the way that it is? So we supplemented our segmentation strategy with a really deep understanding and engagement with consumers to really understand that, so we could really put together a very focused strategy that we could have confidence in terms of how it was focused and what were the key areas. So that's kind of really culminated in the strategy itself that I'll be walking you through, and so hopefully I'll give you a sense of how it's done, but also critically the degree to which it is robust, it is consumer-led, it is fact-led, but also I think you'll see it, and hopefully there's a bit of imagination and quite a bit of aspiration and ambition attached to it as well in terms of moving forward. So today, in terms of really the role and purpose of the webinar, although it's been touched on, is really to give you that first look at the domestic tourism strategy, including in particular the segmentation strategy. I know the document in terms of the report is available, but there's one thing reading it and there's another thing hearing about it. So hopefully I can play a good role in doing a walkthrough of that and help to build understanding and engagement in it. We'll also, appreciating the restrictions of the webinar, be hoping to answer questions that arise, some of which that have been fed in before the webinar, but also as we're working through it, there is a live chat facility that as questions come through, we can hopefully respond in real time, or at a minimum document those questions and then come back to them. We also want to talk about action planning. I mean, that's critical as well. I mean, there's one thing, you know, knowing the strategy, there's another thing, taking action and doing something with it. So we'll touch on that in terms of what is the action planning, and then indeed, what are the next steps. I'll be handing back to Naomi to wrap up. So that's really what we're going to be doing in the time that we've got together today. Okay. So let me talk a little bit about the overall strategic context for the work. So really important stuff here. I mean, I did allude to earlier the importance of the domestic market, even historically, but maybe it's increased importance now. But the first thing to say is look at the volume of the overnight trips, you know, so it's 44%. And okay, everything is in there, but that's 2.2 million trips. So it is a very significant dimension in terms of volume that has to be sustained and maintained and developed. And particularly as well, when we think about increased accommodation capacity, you know, there is now potentially supply there and that has to be met. And so the volume perspective in terms of overnight trips to the domestic market is critically important. And of course, as well, in terms of revenue and spend contribution, it's at 31% historically. So again, that's a very significant chunk. I mean, none of us can afford to lose 31% or a third of our overall spend base. So we've got to realize that. And also the revenue that it contributes is significant. But again, the opportunity as well is to maybe deepen that spend, broaden that spend, extract more value from the base. So if we can get the, and I'll talk about it shortly, the equation between value and volume right, there's a real prize there to be had. Perhaps in some ways, even more importantly than these figures is the role that it plays from a regional and a seasonal perspective. So you guys as industry will be really, really aware of this. But I mean, from a broader perspective and from a tourism perspective, it's really important that the benefits of tourism are both spread regionally and also seasonally. So from an economic point of view, but also a social point of view, in rural economies and less urbanized areas, it's really important we get the regional balance right. And also we can't have peaks and troughs, or there will be peaks and troughs, but we have to try and extend the seasons and make sure that there is a year-round business there. And the truth is that the domestic market offers real potential and is a real mainstay both of regional and seasonal tourism. So for a really healthy sector to be continued and supported over time, a really healthy domestic market is hugely important. So they're key kind of contexts that we'll operate within. The other thing to say is there is a real opportunity for growth when you look at the analysis. So think about where the domestic market is going when they're not staying within the market itself. So 64% of overnight trips made by Northern Ireland residents in 2018 were taken outside Northern Ireland. And that's not surprising, and that's fine as the statistics, they're going off on holidays, they're going overseas. But what's really interesting is of that 64% that are taking the overnight trips outside of Northern Ireland, 24% of them are going to Great Britain and 35% of them are going to the Republic of Ireland. And the hypothesis here is that in offer, and in their characteristics, both GB and the Republic of Ireland are approximately the same or very similar to the potential proposition that the domestic market can offer. So we have to beg ourselves the question of these large volume of people who are choosing to go to GB and the Republic of Ireland, what is the opportunity to retain them within Northern Ireland and really influence them to say, you know what, I'm going to stay in Northern Ireland. I think I'm going to stay domestic. I'm going to do a staycation, and I don't need to go to GB. I don't need to go to the Republic of Ireland because of the proposition here, whether it be a longer or a shorter break, is really, really compelling. So it's such a volume of people choosing GB and the Republic of Ireland, which will continue to a certain extent. We have to think to ourselves that if we really can crack the domestic market, will those numbers go down, and will we retain them within Northern Ireland? And as a consequence of that, can we really drive real value and volume out of the domestic market that can really support our overall market? I think the other thing to say is, notwithstanding the situation we find ourselves in currently, is that for Northern Ireland, or for most markets for that matter, to thrive on an international basis, it's really important to have a strong domestic market. That's why restaurants are full. That's why there is investment for attractions. That's why people are motivated to put festivals and events in place, because often a healthy domestic market really is a catalyst to that investment, to the creation of events, to the improved quality of product. So again, it's in everyone's interest, both when you think about not just domestic, but more broadly in terms of Northern Ireland's tourism offering, to have a strong domestic market. I referenced this earlier, but there is a real opportunity, we think, to get the value-volume equation right. So what we've seen is pretty steady but minimal growth in terms of the number of trips in recent years. But if you take 17 to 18 only, 2017 to 18 only, we've seen a really good bump in value. So values working ahead of volume. And therefore, by logic, if we can enhance volume, we can accelerate value even more. So there is a bottom line around about a really good economic model that we can tap into the domestic market. Yes, increase the number of overnight trips and the overall volume, but actually do more in terms of increasing value. And that's obviously a critical dimension for all of industry to get that balance right. So again, that's a good strategic context for us to bear in mind in terms of the importance of that. There are really important macro considerations behind this as well. So we're looking at, over the next 10 odd years, we're looking at a population profile shift. There will be a growth in numbers in terms of real terms, about 90,000 people within Northern Ireland, but there's going to be a growth in 25% of people over 65 years old. So we've got to be conscious of that in terms of the domestic market, what that profile looked like and what it might mean in terms of our overall product and experience offering. As we look out now, the economy and consumer sentiments, it's somewhat unknown. Who knows what's going to follow post-COVID, recession, Brexit. So it could have, very real issues could be presented, but very real opportunities could be presented as well. Could it lead towards a bias towards the domestic market and an increased importance? Quite possibly, and it certainly will in the near term. So we're going to be really kind of clear and aware of that. And we have to make the assumption that competition is likely to intensify. So when it comes to competition, as borne out by the data, ROI and GB are the key competitors, and Republic of Ireland is particularly strong. And although, often there's a partnership approach in some ways with Fáilte Ireland, they are increasing advertising spend, they are increasing capital expenditure, and all of this has the potential to, really fish in the Northern Ireland domestic market. So again, that's a key consideration around about improving our offering, communicating better to our domestic market, and having a really compelling overall proposition for the domestic consumer to make sure that not only do we grow it, but we don't actually lose it, we retain that really, really important base. From a consumer and brand context, some of the kind of key considerations are, having done the analysis, both on old data or historical data, plus engaging with consumers now, the NI brand is strong. So it is viewed as positively as the Republic of Ireland, and has a stronger profile than Great Britain, particularly in the context of short breaks. So there is an opportunity there. We've got good brand equity to work with. And one of the dimensions to pay particular attention to is that the value for money driver as an image driver is stronger in Northern Ireland than the Republic of Ireland. And looking out into the kind of economic market that we might face into, that is a good driver to have a strength in. So we've got good equity to work with. Also, there is momentum. notwithstanding, again, the times that we live in now and the inflection point that COVID-19 has surely brought about, is that the metrics of being interested in taking a break in Northern Ireland, having an intention and doing actual plan, have been improving and strengthening over the last 5 years. So with investment and with communications development, it has had traction with the domestic market. So there is momentum and people are well disposed. So there is a foundation to build on here. And also within communications, we know from analysis that certainly recent communications efficacy has been very strong, but there is a real consideration on spend here, and we could face into an increasingly competitive landscape for share of voice and being noticed within the domestic market. So communications have to be invested in, they have to be very pointed, they have to be very compelling, they have to have traction. So again, these are all key contexts for us to really consider. So when we think about that, before we actually go into the strategy, let's have a moment of reflection around what's the scale of ambition. And this scale of ambition was obviously developed alongside our ambition for growing international markets, growing GB, and growing the Republic of Ireland. And where we've got to is it's 2030, is around about looking at about 24% growth in trips and a 31% growth in spend. And what we've taken, that's been taken here, is a kind of steady state, prudent enough approach. We think it's both ambitious but doable within the domestic market. So we're looking at about a 2% per annum growth on trips and a 2.5% growth per annum in an overall spend and value. And that doesn't factor in inflation, so there might be more to be had within that. But again, we think that the domestic market can certainly be quite resilient. We can get it in steady state. And these are targets that can actually be reached. But the important thing to say is that they are targets that will also enable Northern Ireland and the industry to have a very strong, reliable foundation to actually have good, sustainable businesses that can progress, that can be invested in, and we can continue to develop our product and experience offering. And all the time, really meet the needs of the domestic market, maintain it and develop it. But as we go through it, get the value to volume equation right and extract real value from the market as well, while also obviously satisfying and delivering the needs of the overall people within the market. So again, that's some really important in terms of how ambitious we're going to be and what we can achieve. If not in the terms of these figures, if not even go for greater growth than is potentially laid out here. Okay, so without further ado, if that's the kind of background and that's the overall targets that we have, the first question really is to say, before we go into what are the tactics or what are the strategies that we're going to deploy, is to really ask ourselves the question of who we're targeting. What does the market look like? Who's there? Who's available? What are their needs? What are their perspectives? What are they passionate about? Because critically understanding all of that allows us to think through how we connect with them, influence them, and win them on a sustainable basis. So really importantly, this isn't about guesswork. This is about really engaging with the consumer and doing robust work that allows us to analytically and also imaginatively and creatively segment the domestic market. So as I referenced earlier, we undertook a very detailed quantitative and qualitative study of the market. And what we examined in there were various things and various questions. We quite a lot of information that we gathered. But in a summary, what we looked at is really understanding the consumer's attitudes and motivations towards short breaks generally. So there's a fundamental need state and a fundamental motivations we needed to understand. So before we even introduced the layer of Northern Ireland, what is it that people want? What is it that they need? What is it that they're passionate about? How are they behaving and why are they behaving? So critically, we looked at that. We looked at what they've done in the past in terms of past behaviors, but also future behaviors. What is going to influence them? How are they going to book? Where are they going to go? All these sorts of things. It's hard to predict always what will happen in the future, but you can get a lot of insight by understanding what's happened in the past and any adjustments that are likely to take place in the future. So we will have looked at that. One of the key areas we had also looked at is the perception of Northern Ireland in the competitive context. So really within this, it's really important to say that every entity, all brands, all organizations, all destinations, whether they like it or not, they sit within a competitive context. And to be really kind of ambitious and be very focused, we've got to ask ourselves the question is, if Northern Ireland is going to win it in the domestic market, who's going to lose and how are we going to beat them? So it's one thing knowing our strengths, but how do they stack up relative to others? And how can we then leverage our strengths in order to really win versus our competitors? And also, where have we got weaknesses that we absolutely need to address in order to win? So we could do a strategy all about ourselves, all about Northern Ireland just in isolation, but we had to really look at how Northern Ireland stacked up relative to our key competitors in the Republic of Ireland and Great Britain. And that allowed us to strategize well, think well, and then hopefully, as time rolls out, execute well. And then what are the means and triggers to which Northern Ireland could influence the consumer? So really having all those understandings, saying, okay, we can't do everything. You know, there's certain things we must do. There's certain things we must prioritize. Some things are more important than others. And rather than us kind of make up our mind about our gut and intuition, let's understand that from a consumer's perspective. And then when we imagine what those triggers are, we validate them through qualitative research. So be really highly confident around about how to influence and what are those key trigger points, many of which we know already and we've just affirmed probably to this work, but hopefully there are some new ones as well. But in the round, it helps us to develop a very pointed and clear view on how to influence people as we go out and invest and communicate and do all the things that we're going to need to do in order to really sustain, develop and enhance the domestic market. So without further ado, when we looked at all of that data, when we did all that work, and we went through the, I suppose, the more scientific dimension of what's called a cluster and factor analysis and looking at all the data, what we determined was, with great kind of consistency and high levels of confidence, is that we could see the market having 6 key segments. And here they are, the headline. I'll talk about them in some detail, and then I'll talk about them in a lot of detail in terms of the priority segments. We had a segment called the comfort seekers at 13%. We'll talk about them. We had a segment that we've called the pragmatists at 13%. We had a large family segment at 30%, which we called aspiring families. We had a segment coming in at 14%, short break enthusiasts. We had another segment at 15%, the natural quality seekers, and a further younger segment at 15% called the social Instagrammers. So they're just kind of names and numbers at the moment. And what we're going to spend is a good bit of time unpacking who they are, what they need. But in particular, we're going to focus in the priority segments to give you a depth of understanding with respect to these segments, but also give you a good understanding of why they're priority segments. Not just because they're big or because they're worth a certain amount of money, but why are they priority segments beyond those dimensions as well. Okay. So at a high level, let's just talk about these segments just to give you some understanding. First of all, comfort seekers. So what we see in these are, these are inclined to be a little bit older. And they are probably, from an economic point of view, don't have as much disposable income or cash. But really what's defining about this segment is, and seen here in the quote is, I know what I want, and I know what I like, and I like what I know. So these are creatures of habit. They like to stay with the familiar. They're less inclined to be more adventurous. So they like to go back to familiar places where they can relax. And that's what they're defined by. They're not adventurous. They don't spend a whole lot of money. They're more formulaic. And what they're seeking is comfort in terms of somewhere comfortable to stay, but also safety and security and familiarity. Not diversity, not necessarily new experience, but that's what they're after. The second segment, the pragmatists, what they'd be inclined to say is breaks are important, but you have to be sensible with your decisions. So these are very pragmatic bunch of people, as they're kind of titled. They are very strong on balancing their decisions between the economics of it and the overall benefits of it. They make their decisions in very clear-cut ways. They're very inclined to try to research things and research things well. Their spend is, in relative terms, relatively low, so they're not inclined to overspend on their holidays. They're the type of people that have routines, have an itinerary, go and do it, and still continue to manage the budget while they're on a holiday, and like to feel like they're making good, sensible decisions about the type of holiday they're choosing, the type of break that they're choosing, the investment that they're putting into it, and that they're using their time well. The third segment is probably a mainstay of the market, and this is the family segment at 30%, very, very significant. And we've called them aspiring families, and we'll talk about these in a little bit more detail. And what they're most likely to say, it's all about connecting with the kids, proper family time and experiences. So because they are inclined to have younger children, their breaks and holidays are all about the connection and the relationships that they build during these holidays. And although they're economically minded, having a really great time with the children and building family bonds is so important that sometimes they are willing to make the investment to really ensure that the breaks that they have and the time they spend is of a very high quality. And we'll talk about those a little bit more. The fourth segment is short break enthusiasts. These are the people who really love holidays, short breaks, longer breaks. They're passionate about travel. They believe that there's so much to discover and experience. So interestingly, and not to give too much away, is that this is a segment that, although they're passionate about short breaks and holidays, they show a very low tendency to consider Northern Ireland because they feel they know it. And what they want to do is explore the world beyond Northern Ireland and see new things and go new places and get on the plane and travel, or do the longer drive and travel. So what's interesting with this segment is that although they're very enthusiastic about it, they're not particularly enthusiastic about Northern Ireland. And we'll have a look at some of that. The fifth segment we've called natural quality seekers. This is an older segment, but that is very focused on good quality accommodation, but also hugely motivated and interested in the natural environment and beautiful scenery and the relaxing that they can do in it. And they're inclined to say things like, there's nothing better than staying in a beautiful place, being surrounded by beauty. So they have that particular need and want within that. As I say, they're an older segment. They are of good economic value, but they're clear about what they're looking for in terms of good quality, being comfortable where they are, having a good accommodation, good experiences, but also really enjoying the natural environment and everything it has to offer. The final segment, coming in at 15%, is called the social Instagrammers, a much younger segment, much more in the vein of thinking about the urban experiences that they could have. And they're inclined to say, you know, you got to get out there and see what's happening, get to the heart of, get to the buzz of it. So it's all about the experience for them. It's not necessarily about having amazing accommodation. It's about having amazing experiences or interesting experiences or unique experiences, slightly more energetic. It's about socialization. It's about an element of fun. It's about connectivity between whether it be their significant other or their friends, all in a kind of very squeezed in, jam-packed kind of itinerary that gives them very good energy and a good experience out of that. So in broad strokes, that's what the market looks like. These are our segments. But the really interesting question for us to ask now is, well, I can't target anyone. In all segmentation, there is really a case of there's nobody we don't want, but the question or the statement is always there's people who just want more than others. So it was really important within this activity to do some good prioritization work and to do it logically as well. So what we did is we looked at all the segments and we asked ourselves a couple of key questions. How big is the segment? Is there a volume of them? Critically, what's the value of the segment? So what is their estimated spend on short breaks on an annual basis? Okay. And look at propensity. Are they positive towards Northern Ireland? And what is their intention of taking a break, a future break within Northern Ireland, and balancing these out? So what we looked at here is, we said, what's the overall value of the segment? So are they a large segment that has good economic value? Because what you're looking for here is an overlay. There's enough of them and they have plenty of money to spend, of course. We don't want a really small segment that has very little disposable income. It's not always a great bet. And also, what's their positivity and their disposition towards Northern Ireland already? So do they show good intent? Do they show good interest? Do they show good planning? And also from a positivity and a feasibility point of view, how does Northern Ireland stack up relative to competitors? So if we find a segment whereby we think they're of good economic value, but they really aren't very positive towards Northern Ireland, why would we prioritize them? Maybe we do it because it's a challenge, but maybe not. But the magic equation in some ways, or the balanced equation that we were looking for here, is to find segments that were of appropriate scale, good economic value, but well disposed already towards Northern Ireland as a holiday and short break destination, because these are the ones that we could reach out to and hopefully influence and connect with. The other thing to say in this exercise is that really by prioritizing segments, generally what can happen is if you improve for these segments, by default, you improve for all segments. So being really good for a particular set of segments will improve communications, it'll improve experience, it'll improve product, all these things. And therefore, having prioritization generally focuses the mind, but also increases the quality and the degree to which Northern Ireland, or any destination for that matter, is compelling to all segments. It drives improvement. So when we did all that work, what came through when you looked at the scale of them, the value of them, and also their distribution towards Northern Ireland, is that we came to conclude there was 3 priority segments: the natural quality seekers, the aspiring families, and the social Instagrammers. And in some ways, that gives us a spread of 60% of the market. So it really is, we don't have to be too much in the concern about leaving anyone out. So there's a very strong volume of people that we're targeting, but allows us a pointed focus in terms of our activities and efforts and communications at these segments if we understand them. So what we're going to do now is build out our understanding of the overall priority segments and talk about them in a little bit more detail to give you some level of appropriate insight into them. So let's start with the natural quality seekers to try and understand them. So some of the key characteristics we bear in mind here is that, first of all, they're 15% of the market. Really importantly, you'll see in the kind of middle bottom of the screen, they have a very significant estimated annual spend in relative terms. Now, I know we haven't showed you all of the spends, but these are the second highest spenders in terms of their short breaks. So that's a positive dimension. They tend to be older, a little bit more male, they have older kids, and so on and so forth. What's important to them is they're really looking for good accommodation. Quality of accommodation is really important. So they will over-index in statements like the quality and location of my accommodation is very important. So they don't mind investing in that. Another key characteristic is that they are very much motivated by nature. They love the outdoors, they love scenery, they love the natural environment and exploring and engaging in that. It helps them relax, and it's an enjoyable dimension of their holiday. Attached to that, they have a preference for gentle activities. So what they want to do here is walking, maybe a tiny bit of hiking, but really being out in the elements and enjoying them and engaging with the elements as well. But having that done through gentle activities as well. Interestingly, and it's obviously an increasing trend, they would over-index on the degree to which they feel sustainability is important. And this makes sense in the context of their interest and passion for the environment, passion for nature and scenery. So not only do they like to be in beautiful places, but they like to be in places where they know that the environment is being protected, that sustainability is on the agenda. So again, that's an important characteristic with respect to the natural quality seekers. And obviously within all of that, short breaks are an important part of their lives, and they do enjoy planning. So they're motivated by that. And that's really a key dimension to what they do. In terms of some of the kind of other needs, they are very much attracted to kind of coastal touring and beaches, the natural environments, the eating and drinking propositions are very important, houses, castles, and gardens, wildlife and nature. All of this sort of stuff is really important. And the truth is, when you look at Northern Ireland, they are quite motivated by Northern Ireland already. They hold it in high regard and in good esteem. The question was to ask ourselves is, what dimensions can we dial up in terms of the experiences that we deliver, in terms of the communications that we put forward to really resonate with this segment. They do a lot of their research online. Google's their first protocol, but they also put a lot of stock in word of mouth. As you'd imagine, in terms of the overall profile, they put a lot of stock in the word of mouth as well. So that is going to be important. So it has to be, for this segment, it's not just one dimension or another. It is about really good online presence, having good word of mouth, and then being really confident about the quality of accommodation, being really confident around about the quality of the environment they're going to be in, the natural scenery nearby, and all these sort of things, and the food and drink offering that will really influence this overall segment. So that's the natural quality seekers. We move into the second segment, and quite a different segment at 30%, the aspiring families. So let's have a look at that segment and try and understand these guys in a little more detail. So what we have here again is these are the economically the most valuable segment, and that may not be surprising given that they are probably traveling as a family unit, and therefore they have to spend more. It's not just a couple, it's a couple plus family, and therefore the economics will drive that. But importantly as well, that these people would consider themselves bargain hunters, but they're very clear around about not being afraid to pay a bit of a premium for a better experience, for better accommodation, for a better overall short break or holiday. And this is really interesting because what they're trying to do here is maximize the quality of the time that they have with their family and with their children in an effort to connect with them. So they want a great experience, they want a great environment, they want a great accommodation, not necessarily because they want to pamper themselves, but more because that is the foundations of having a really great holiday together. And the better the holiday, the better the emotional connections and the bonds that can be built through the families and the memories that can be made. So it's a key emotional dimension. They are looking for some energy out of the holiday, so they're not a sedentary bunch. They like fun and adventure. So they believe that they can build relationships or memories with their children through doing things, through activities, maybe things they haven't tried before, a little bit of soft adventure, and shared experiences that both parents and children can participate in and drive real enjoyment from. As I said, very strong family focus, but they do, of course, then need the activities that they are in place for them to be family friendly. They're very active in their planning. The last thing I want to do is leave things to chance. So provision of information and being able to build itineraries, or at least for themselves, being able to build a really clear idea of what they can do is important to them. They are likely to be younger, of course, with younger children, but their lives are like so many people of their age. They're very busy. We probably have two parents, both working. But what they really want to do is aspire to live their best lives. So in some ways, these people might, in their day-to-day, be trying to be ambitious and progressive in their careers, but they also have ambition for their families in terms of raising a good family, providing good experiences, developing good memories. They can be practical, so value for money is important. They're going to look for good food and drink. They're going to look for a good food and drink offering in terms of their kids, because they know it's important in terms of the quality overall experience. So all of that's happening for them. They are traveling for things like the natural environment. They're traveling to enjoy really good food and drink, because obviously that's a major dimension of the family coming together, wildlife and nature and coastal touring and beaches. They do want an active break. They want to squeeze in as much as they like. They like discovering the hidden gems as well, and driving new experiences with their family as well. And in the end, they want to come back from the holiday going, we had some great times together. And maybe this break, there's certain dimensions or certain days or certain experiences that we'll always remember as being really great family experiences. And even as our family grows older, these memories will stay with us. So these are our aspiring families. And as I say, at 30% of the market, a really important and valuable segment to be pursued and a mainstay of the market. The last priority segment is very different. It's 15%. They're called the social Instagrammers. And this segment is obviously younger. They're the youngest segment. They have an estimated annual spend of a kind of average enough estimated average spend on breaks. But this segment is, again, different, and you may have a sense of what they might be like. So for these guys, they're younger and more focused on urban experiences and social experience. For them, it's all about the buzz, the atmosphere, the nightlife. Short breaks are important. They want to broaden their mind. Another thing that's important is that connectivity is very important to them in terms of Wi-Fi and 4G. They want to be able to get on and be connected, both in terms of getting information in real time, but also sharing information, whether it be through posts, Instagram, whatever it might be. So all that's very, very important to them. They're the least likely segment to have children. They're slightly more likely to be female, and they do travel as groups of friends or as couples as well. They can be practical. They like value for money. And actually, you know, they'll sacrifice getting okay accommodation if it creates the budget for them to have really great experiences. They are looking for great food and drink experiences, really unique things and added value things within that as well. And really, they're looking for good atmosphere, good pub settings, good nightlife settings. They want to have a platform in which they can have good experience and fun experience with friends or with their partner. They want to get the most out of the break, broaden the mind, do lots of things, see lots of things, experience lots of things. What's really important to them is the food and drink offering, the nightlife offering, the shopping offering, the over-index on music and festivals, and all these sorts of things are important to them. They are critically, as well as you'd expect, digital natives. So big users of online. They'll over-index on use of OTAs, such as Booking.com. They'll over-index on Airbnb. They'll over-index on the use of social media. And this is about getting content, but also generating content. So again, it's a younger segment, more urban-based, looking for unique experiences. And again, quite frequent in terms of how they'll take breaks, love spending money on the actual experiences. So again, a different segment that you're probably familiar with, but again, a valuable segment on a domestic basis that we can look at as well. Okay, so they're the segments. And then the question becomes, so we know the opportunity, we know the segments, what is the strategy for growth? Where are we focusing our efforts, or where do we think we're focusing our efforts in terms of activating, investing and resourcing within the domestic market for growth? So having looked at all the work and all the consultation that was done, we derived 4 key pillars that needed to be focused on. And the way we think about it is, let's try and be brilliant in these 4 areas. And these aren't in any order of importance, but they are all equally important. One is about effective communications, and we'll talk about that in some detail. A second pillar is about having really compelling experiences, attractions and events. A third pillar is about citizen and community engagement and advocacy. And fourth pillar, which we're in right here and right now, is about industry and stakeholder engagement. So we'll go through each of these in terms of what's the overarching objective attached to each pillar, and what are the key initiatives that sit in behind it. So let's look at effective communications here. The objective here is to deliver really effective communications that resonate with and influence the domestic audience to take a holiday or short break in Northern Ireland. So, you know, it's really, really vital that we frame or reframe what Northern Ireland represents as a domestic destination for all segments. We haven't mentioned it yet, but there is a small degree of inertia around about the domestic market and Northern Ireland. They think they know it, they think they've seen it, and they're familiar with it. And the truth of it is, if you examine, and the moment you get into a room with the segments and start to talk about the offering that Northern Ireland has available, is they can get quite excited, they can get quite animated. So there's a sense that there is a real opportunity with the segments in mind to tell our story really, really well, really consistently, in a really compelling manner, and really draw out, as we say, the triggers and the motivations that will unlock and motivate the domestic market to say, hey, this is a brilliant option for us, let's go do it. And within this, there's some key dimensions. So one of the first things is that it's logical to say it, but I think we have to really kind of say it nonetheless, is that we have to be very focused on the passion points of the segments. So before we might have known those instinctively and intuitively, but now we know them on a fact-based basis. So there are lots of things that we now know are the passion points of our overall different segments. And I guess on a broad level, we can communicate them. But if there is a segment for you as an individual operator or entity that is really interesting, then you can deep dive that and you can configure your communications around those passion points. So it's really about hitting the target every single time. And that's really, really important. And obviously within this as well, in terms of the Northern Ireland Experience brand, Embrace a Giant Spirit, that'll be sent front and center to broader communications. But again, we can start to interweave and integrate what we know about the domestic market, so it works through that broader campaign as well in the short and the medium term. The second piece is about reviewing the domestic communications architecture. And this is quite a interesting one. And what's happening here is that historically, or maybe what happens some of the times is that from a broader perspective, we might from a communications perspective put forward our really iconic experiences, the things that are really outstanding and we know work or are compelling. But the truth of it is, for many within the domestic market, the icons they now know well, they feel they are familiar with them. So there's a need to reframe that, to make the domestic market sit back and go, I don't know everything. There is stuff to discover, or reframe what is known as the iconic destinations or the iconic experiences to say there is new news, there's new things to do, there's new angles. So all of this needs to be developed and make sure that we're communicating the right things at the right time. And also the channels we need to think through. There are traditional channels, but what came through in the work as well and working with segments is the importance of local council websites, for example, as a destination when you're really trying to deep dive on a domestic basis as to what's there, what's going on, how accessible it is, what are the things to do, what food and drink is available, and what accommodation is available. So really making it easy and accessible. So, you know, and having a communications architecture that puts forward the aspiration, creates the interest, puts new news in place, but also has the practical dimension. Within 1 or 2 clicks, you can really get to the nub of it and understand where to go, where to stay, what to do, what to eat, and all these sorts of things within that as well. So again, thinking about that and then executing a strategy really, really well is very, very important within that. The other thing we'd say as well is the third thing is about developing people's knowledge of the regional offer. So the truth of it is that from the domestic market, they know the market well in pockets, but they know what they know. And the truth of it is that a lot of the domestic audience, a lot of things they don't know and they don't know about them. And there are hidden gems. There are things off the beaten track. There are highlights that they're just not aware of. So a lot of these hidden gems sit in a regional basis as well. So from a communications point of view, there has to be efforts to really dial up the lesser known emerging attractions, whether it be physical or event based or whatever it might be, throughout the regions, to drive that, to say there is so much more to be had. And because of the small geography of Northern Ireland, this is a good strategy in that we can have people in a base, but really encourage them to travel regionally in a given day and return to base, thereby distributing kind of the benefits of tourism on an economic and social basis throughout the regions. But it's got to be done. It can't be assumed that people have the knowledge, and there has to be a concerted effort to dial up the regional offer in terms of the knowledge around that. The second area is, something we'll always be talking about it, but it is the quality of the experience, attractions and events. And the intention here is obviously to build out and continue to improve the new and existing tourism experiences and events. So this is the inventory, this is the stock, this is what we got to sell here. So within this, there's a number of key initiatives. The first thing to say is that with the new insight, there is consideration of the domestic market and product development strategy. And that can happen at a ground level or a more broader level. But although all products and offers need to be developed probably more holistically, thinking about the international markets and ROI and GB simultaneously, we now have the voice and the insight into the domestic market that can influence that. And that hopefully will influence everything from major capital expenditure right down to how an operator, whether it be a hotel or otherwise, might nuance their food offering, because we want to create an interest for our domestic market audience that'll work there and can actually drive interest. So there is a big opportunity to take the information we have and really embed it in all of our thinking. And in particular, we need to think about the family segment here, because we know from the work that we've done is that is a large segment, but there's work to be done in terms of convincing them around about the breadth and depth and quality of the family offering. So again, the quality needs to be highlighted, but also the quality needs to be probably developed and invested in. So again, that's a key consideration when it's such a large segment of how we do that. A second key strategy is the development and promotion of 36-hour propositions. So one of the things that we saw in the work to suffer from is that people go but they don't stay. And really there has to be a concerted effort to build out propositions that talk to the consumer's experience from day, night and next day. And that needs to then say there's a reason to go for the day, there's a reason to stay for the night, an outstanding accommodation to stay for the night, and there's a reason to get up the next day and have another extended experience. So one of the things we spotted when I talk about it later is that Northern Ireland's brunch and breakfast culture offering is deemed to be weak. And part of a journey sometimes is not just about the day and the night and the accommodation. It's about the next couple of hours before you get in the car and lunchtime and go home. And what's the quality of experience there? What can I fit in that is a great experience beyond the day that I've had or the night that I've had? So thinking about that and then being able to devise 36-hour propositions that people think it's a fantastic time I'm going to have. I might spend one night, but also getting the value equation right. So I can do it for it's not exorbitant cost. I can have all these things and have these great experiences to do that. The third one is that we have to accept that there is day trippers, and there always will be, and they're of a high volume. But that doesn't mean we can't extract more value. So what is the day tripper value strategy? So how do we embrace day trippers and say, yeah, because of the proximity, people are going to get in the car in the morning, go do something during the day, and then drive back in the evening. And we accept that. And yes, we'll encourage overnight stays. But how do we extract more value during the day? So what are we going to do that is beneficial to the consumer to say, I don't mind opening my wallet and giving and paying money here because I'm having a fantastic experience, but being really clear about where our opportunities are in a day tripper or in the cycle of the hours that they have available, or where they spend money in food, where they spend money in attractions, merchandise, retail experiences. So being really clear on that and not just letting day trips happen, making them brilliant, but also getting the economic benefit out of day trips. The fourth area is to continue and develop and promote Northern Ireland's food and drink offering. So without a doubt, this has been transformed in recent years, and there is a real opportunity to keep the foot on the pedal here and develop out the offering. In particular, it would seem that the credentials of Northern Ireland in terms of fantastic restaurants for evening meals is strong, very strong. But you have to ask the question is, do we have the proposition right on, daytime or casual dining experiences? Do we have enough sense of food innovation through gastropubs, cafes, premium delis, international cuisine, all these sorts of things? So how do we do that? As I mentioned earlier, how do we really improve our breakfast brunch culture offering, known as being really, really fantastic to support that as well, because currently it's not perceived to be as strong as it could be. So having a look at that. How do we extend the quality of our market and street food offering, which we know is important? Is that good enough? Can we enhance and improve that? So all of that is about taking what is a current strength, but really, really improving it for the domestic market, because it is tied into the other dimension of a 36-hour proposition. Sometimes Northern Ireland will fall over because people don't believe there's enough to do in the morning. So why would I stay at night if I'm just going to get up the car and drive home? So again, food and drink experiences post an overnight stay are really important. There's a big opportunity to develop that. Attached to that, obviously, there's a continuing requirement to develop the nighttime economy as well. So particularly in urban centres. And again, that's a key factor in terms of moving from a day trip to an overnight. So what's the nighttime experience going to be like? And really looking at that as a dimension and improving the overall offering for the domestic market. But obviously it's overlaid in terms of international segments as well. Developing the nighttime economy is very important. And lastly, again, it's a fundamental thing to say, but the infrastructure, facilities and development and policy needs to be addressed, continue to best. And this is really about ensuring all key infrastructure and facilities are improved over time. And really they're done so they enhance not only the tourism offering, but it's to the benefit of local communities as well. So that has to be looked at, and really a good civic fabric to really work with, to say, this is a really great place to be, it's clean, it has good facilities, the infrastructure is good, and the investment to improve that. On a policy basis, there needs to be some thinking around about lobbying and how to really create a very tourism-friendly policy and licensing laws, extending to things like pub hours, street trading, retail trading times. You can see the obvious connection here between really creating valuable and really good experiences and actually having the conditions from a policy point of view in terms of being able to create these really great experiences. So these are the key initiatives from an experience, attraction and event point of view. The third is about citizen community engagement. And this is a really interesting dimension. But the truth of it is that from a domestic point of view, the more that residents in Northern Ireland are positive about Northern Ireland and have pride in its tourism offering, well, of course, then the more they're inclined to holiday, to short break in Northern Ireland. So it's about driving the intention, driving positivity and pride in Northern Ireland as a tourism destination. So it's logical. They say, well, I want to stay here because it's great and there's so much to offer, but being structured about that. And within this, the recommendations and the strategies are around about establishing and developing a domestic tourism advocacy strategy and program. So we can't just let word of mouth be good. We can't assume that, people know what they need to know and they know about the good moves and the good developments. It's about doing that in a structured way. So it's about promoting at a domestic basis advocacy and pride in regional offerings within tourism as well. It's about community engagement to drive that. So all these things that people, in experience, I live in Dublin and I'm familiar with the Republic of Ireland market, but residents in the Republic of Ireland generally feel really good about Republic of Ireland's tourism offering. And that needs to be true of Northern Ireland as well. The residents are really proud and motivated by the local offering within Northern Ireland. So it's about doing that in a structured way. It's about the second recommendation of developing a dedicated regional communications program designed to engender civic pride and local confidence. So it builds on that as well. It's about those regional communications. It's about putting in place things like toolkits for local communities so they can actually promote and be empowered to promote their own regional towns and regional locations on a domestic basis. So this is as much about empowerment as anything else. So being proud about your region and its tourism offering, but then being equipped and being confident and being able to promote it but also collaborate with people in your region as well in order to do that is really important. So that's an area of community engagement to be looked at as well. And also, lastly, create a systematic approach to recruitment, training and supporting local volunteers to contribute to the tourism experience. So again, this is very important as well. And that we see there is the already established the World Host Programme, but it's about building that out and really engaging people on a domestic basis to participate in, on a voluntary basis, the overall tourism offering. There's lots of people who do it. There's lots of people who are motivated to do it. But being really successful in a structured way that people can engage and participate and contribute to tourism from goodwill and volunteering is really, really important. So getting this right is very important, and it creates a very sustainable basis for really authentic, high quality experiences that are delivered not only for international visitors, but for people within the domestic market as well. The last pillar is really all about you to a certain degree, and that's about industry collaboration, activity and development. And the objective here is to continue to collaborate and build connections at all levels to ensure the progress and development of the domestic tourism offering. So really making sure there's a joined up approach here. And the key initiatives here are to really, where we're in at the moment is really to embed and build the appreciation of the importance of the domestic market across the entire tourism industry. So the industry is really motivated to perform with respect to the domestic market. It has the insights, it has the understandings, and it has the drive and the will to really make it to put a brilliant offering in front of the domestic markets so we can drive performance and sustain it. The second area is about facilitating the building out of connected local tourism propositions and experiences with industry partners. So I've been working in tourism, to be honest with you, probably circa 12 years now, and this is still there. It is, and it probably will never go away, is the effort to build out connected local tourism propositions. So it's not about what I can do really well, it's about what we can really do well. And that's always going to be a body of work, but I think there is a real opportunity in the here and now, for now more than ever, the industry within Northern Ireland to take a combined approach and really put forward very connected tourism propositions that deliver to the consumer a fantastic holistic experience. And from a domestic point of view, the opportunity is now, we know really, really well who the consumer is. So we have a blueprint or a reference point from which we can come together, have common dialogue, build out the experiences, build out the propositions and go and deliver them. So we all benefit from them. And we've got a great overall domestic offering that then will also, from a foundational point of view, really map into the Republic of Ireland for no matter any of the improvements we make here should extend into that market as well and hopefully attract a volume of people from the Republic of Ireland. And last but not least, we've touched on it slightly, is from an industry point of view, is to really empower and enable industry to best utilise digital as the means to drive performance within the domestic market. So you'll know this very well, the importance of digital, but that has to be developed even further. Really, the ambition here is to make sure that industry is a black belt in digital, very proficient in it, utilises OTAs to the best possibilities, strategically uses co-op initiatives to really drive performance and communications, really takes existing assets or existing databases and retargets, drives repeat. So for people who might be in business trips or at a wedding, how do we use that event, that good event, to trigger another short break or holiday experience or occasion? And being structured around about that and really seeing digital as an asset that can be leveraged to really connect in a cost efficient way with the domestic market and really build competencies within that, because we know all segments are engaging in digital and all of our priority segments are quite proficient and really rely on it in terms of getting ideas, booking, organizing holidays and all dimensions of it. So being really fantastic in that area is very important. So that's the strategy that will be implemented. In terms of performance, before we kind of wrap up this module here, is that, of course, the old adage, what gets measured matters. So there is performance indicators for implementation. There's some fundamental ones. So obviously the number of trips and revenue, is that going in the right direction? That's the kind of, we have a benchmark through NISRA in relation to that. Funnel metrics. So are people more positive towards Northern Ireland? Is interest increasing? Is intent increasing? Is planning increasing? So if we implement the strategy, we should see the positive impact of it. We've got to measure that. The return on marketing investment. So there is only a certain amount of resource, a certain amount of cash to be invested in marketing. So we've got to be very pointed around about measuring and ensuring that that investment is well spent and learning from it, knowing what works and leveraging what works and then evolving it. There has to be a measure around about building out both general knowledge and regional knowledge that we can build through the existing brand tracker. So we can't rest on our laurels in terms of building an appreciation and understanding of what generally is there is available and the regional insight and understanding. So that'll be critical as well. So we're measuring that. And then last but not least, are we driving community engagement and volunteering? Are people participating in the tourism ecosystem from a voluntary point of view? Are communities coming together and communicating well and really being proud about what their region has to offer, and then going and communicating it well and having resonance and then driving people into the regions or into those specific locations? So there are some softer and harder metrics here that will be applied, and we will learn. The intent is obviously we'll learn as we go. But overall, our linchpin is a really good understanding of who the consumer is, who our priority segments are, and being really clear about the key strategic pillars that will implement overall. In terms of next steps, you know, that's all the thinking, but the rubber has to hit the road now, and we need to move into action planning. So within this, that's on the way. It's the time to start doing. And all I'd say is that there's detailed planning and sales resources in development that you guys can engage with and leverage, and then really allow you to plan well and execute well. And this is designed to really engage, to enable broad participation and the facilitation of, you know, industry making really focused decisions and then taking really pointed actions, so you can be really confident around that the efforts you put into the domestic market are going to pay off. So that's the point of view around about the action plan, and there will be follow-up, I think, events and resources, and they will become clear and be made available, and hopefully you can engage in them in time. Some questions really quickly that you may have, and I know we've been dealing with questions in live chat, but some other questions that may have hopped up and we'll deal them really quickly is, you know, how can we best keep step with T&I's marketing strategy? So I think there's a couple of things in here as well, is that, you know, there is the e-zine that's available on Tourism NI. So, you know, that'll talk to you about, keep you up to date with the opportunities, including marketing opportunities within that. So, you know, very much tune into that. Then there is going to be the launch of a recovering marketing campaign post COVID-19. So absolutely tune into that. There is a cooperative marketing fund being made available. So again, there's opportunities within that. But really the thing here is around about just, you know, from a T&I perspective, information will be made available. Please engage in it. Please engage with T&I to ensure that any marketing strategy or investments you make can be aligned. It can really be maximized based on what T&I is doing, but also doing it in partnership with the industry. Maybe a big question is, are we in competition with the Republic of Ireland? Or how can we best collaborate with ROI and the rest of the UK? Well, the truth of it is we are, from this point of view, you know, we do want to win versus the Republic of Ireland. So we want to attract people in from the Republic of Ireland, but we want to keep people from Northern Ireland in Northern Ireland as well. So a competitive mindset is useful. Of course, on a broader basis, there is always a cooperation with Tourism Ireland and Fáilte Ireland that will continue from an all Ireland point of view. But yeah, absolutely, let's think about how domestically we can compete and retain our domestic market versus Republic of Ireland as well. So that's a reality. A question around about, you touched on other segments and some priority segments. What if I feel a priority segment, one of the priority segments isn't the best segment for my business in terms of targeting? Well, that's absolutely fine. We're not prescribing that. There are the other segments. There's the depth of insight and depth of understanding around the other segments. So as you want to unpack the overall segmentation strategy, if there's a need or desire to look at the segments and understand in more detail, the information's there. We've just got to ask for it, and it'll be made available, and we can work on that as well. So it doesn't preclude other segments. So as you seek out more information, it will be available to you. So that's everything from me. I think all it's over to me now to hand back to Naomi. I hope you found that interesting and informative, and hopefully it was the right pace. And all I can say is that personally, it was a very enjoyable piece of work to do. I'd be very optimistic about Northern Ireland's opportunity and potential to really maximize and build out the strength within the domestic market. And I wish you all the best in all of your efforts in the near and long term. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Conor. I know there was a lot in there, so I'd encourage you to take some time to review the information on tourismni.com and register for the follow-up session on developing your action plan. But before you go, I'd just like to update you on how we'll be implementing the strategy over the weeks ahead. We're due to go live with our Northern Ireland Embrace a Giant Spirit campaign in both Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland on the 30th of June. To inform those campaigns, we have, in partnership with Fáilte Ireland, been tracking consumer sentiment right across the island. We know from that research that connecting with family, enjoying the outdoors, coastal and rural experiences, and exploring country houses, castles and gardens are those things that people are looking forward to most. Again, all of that research can be found on tourismni.com, and I really would encourage you to have a read through before the session on developing your action plans. That research shows that the aspiring families and the social Instagrammers will be the segments who are currently the most open to taking a short break in Northern Ireland. So we will be focusing on those initially. And in the Republic of Ireland, we'll be targeting the active maximisers and the open to ideas segments. And again, you can find more detail of those on the website. That means all our media planning for a campaign and the types of products and experiences we showcase will be aligned to the preferences of those visitors. We'll also be extending our cooperative marketing fund for the campaign to support your own marketing activity. We've extended that to include both Northern Ireland as well as the Republic of Ireland markets, and we've increased the support rate to 75% towards the total cost of your marketing activity. And you can find all of the criteria for the fund and the terms and conditions on tourismni.com as well. I hope you find that useful, and thank you once again for joining us today.